It is my honor and pleasure to introduce to you our next speaker, Dr. Janelle Brady. She's an award-winning Black Studies scholar, author, and activist researcher. This is very humble because there's so much more. But okay, Dr. Brady is also an assistant professor in the School of Early Childhood Studies at Toronto Metropolitan University, where she curates and teaches courses on equity, Black childhoods, and social justice pedagogies. Her research focuses on Black mothering, Blackness in early childhood studies, and Black feminisms. Let's give a warm welcome to Janelle.
Thank you so much, Shelley. It's very, very much an honor to be introduced by you. Like I had mentioned, good afternoon, everyone. It's tough acts to follow, presenting in the afternoon, so hopefully I have your energy and engagement, so I appreciate you all being here. It's been a wonderful day of learning, unlearning, and growth, so I'm very happy to be here in community with each of you. As mentioned, my name is Janelle. I go by she, her pronouns, and I'm a faculty member in the School of Early Childhood Studies, as Shelley has already mentioned. I've been looking forward to this day for quite some time, and I'll just say Happy May Day to everyone as well. It is International Day for Workers. So workers internationally are recognized for their work and contributions. So thanks to all of you for being here and showing up today. So I know we already had a land acknowledgement to set things in the right tone this morning, but I would also like to reiterate the land acknowledgement as we come together this afternoon. So Tikaranto, otherwise known as Toronto, is located in the Dish with One Spoon territory. The Dish with One Spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, the Mississaugas, and the Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and to protect the land. We are all collectively treaty people, and it is our responsibility as treaty people to maintain the spirit of the Dish with One Spoon covenant. I also acknowledge the many people of African descent who were brought forcibly to work on these lands through the transatlantic slave trade, through the project of enslavement, including my own ancestors. Together, as members of communities, we can all individually and collectively work to challenge and dismantle ongoing forms of oppression through our work, community, and play. So in terms of the agenda, just to kind of set the pace for what you should expect in this talk, I'll start off with an exploration activity. This is a self-reflection activity. If we had time to kind of work through it, we could take, can you hear me well, actually? We could take quite some time just with the exploration activity, where we break out into small groups, small pairs. But for the purpose of this address, this keynote address, we'll keep it very high level, and hopefully you can reflect on the key takeaways from this exercise. I will warn that I could warrant and bring up certain emotions and feelings and discomfort to some of the conversation that we were having earlier today. So if these are experiences that are your own, feel free to step aside, to pass, take deep breaths. There's water, looking at the water, or even stepping out of the room if it becomes too heavy for you. If there are experiences that are not your own and you're just learning about them, then perhaps sit with that discomfort, as Dr. Shawnee Hardware reminds me and many others, sit with that discomfort in order to propel, grow, and push for change and action. Then I'll go into context, a bit from a study called Honoring Black Refusals, so honoring Black mothers, so we can hear from participant voice, followed by honoring Black RECEs, registered early childhood educators, takeaways, and gratitude. So jumping right in, so this exploration activity, just as a reminder, it does involve emotional work. As I said, passing is okay. So exploration activity. So I'll read out the prompts and just reflect. You don't need to expose particularly what speaks to you. I will take it up afterwards and ask if anything resonated with folks and just have you reflect on why that was and those pieces. So jumping right in. So the first question is for you to think about. A lot of it is based on going through a settler colonial education system. So or early child care context. So if you, let's say, for example, my family's from the Caribbean. So a lot of these experiences would not be relevant because the school is an extension of the home and part of the family, right? So it's not necessarily a space to some of the conversations raised earlier where families have to worry, are my children being truly cared for? So I'd say, I'm just giving that caveat. So placed into an educational program without your family's knowing. So for example, in the secondary system in Ontario, previously there was academic leading to university pathways and applied leading to college pathways, which absolutely nothing wrong with whatever pathway, but it's really about families not knowing. Told to take a particular course because it's easier. Told that you are too loud. Parents or caregivers had to advocate or intervene in school for you. Being suspended or expelled from a school or ECE setting. Need to become an advocate for a sibling or a family member. Told that you are smart for a quote unquote race person, but on the flip side, my students that I've done this activity with recently have said on the other side, told you are not smart enough for a quote unquote race person. Asked where are you from, or asked where you are really from when you answer. Fear of deportation when filling out school forms or documentation. Told by family members that you need to work twice as hard. Asked for a pass, and that's one of the things, if you know, you know. It's about a lot of young people tell me that this is what's happening in the playgrounds at school. A pass is when someone who is non-Black asks someone who is Black if they can say the N-word, and it happens constantly. Was told it's just a joke. So if you're comfortable, raise your hand if more than one of these apply to you, if you're comfortable. So quite a few of us in the room, right? So for folks who perhaps didn't have any connection to any of these pieces here, I want you to reflect on what that means in terms of what's called your positionality, who you are and how you show up in the world, and what you bring to the early childhood and education and care, because we need to reclaim care, to Amanda's point earlier, to that field. All of these pieces work in tandem. There's an intersectional component and dynamic to this as well, which is important to keep in mind. Further to that, sometimes certain aspects of your identity show up more. So for me, I'm a Black woman, and that shows up. But I can't detangle the two or remove being woman from being Black. They go hand in hand. So that's what Kimberly Crenshaw and Black feminists call intersectionality. So for some people, when I've done this activity, they'll say, yeah, this really relates and resonates with me because I've had to show up and advocate for my sibling because they have a disability or they are disabled, depending on the language choice. But then they'll say, but it didn't have to do with race, or it didn't have to do with race sitting at the intersection of disability. So it's important to think about these pieces and the implications for our work. So I know we did have some good discussion on bias, and it is an important piece to start from. But based on the current literature and prior literature, scholars have asked for us to start with bias, perhaps, but to move beyond that. For one reason, at the individual level, yes, we all can attest to biases, but how can we zoom out at the individual level to a social or a structural level? Look at the historical pieces, look at the current pieces as per where those biases are coming from. So scholars such as Dr. Kariana Sky have asked us to look at the merits of the anti-bias curriculum, looking back at Dermot Sparks's work, which was a foundational piece for the reconceptualizing early childhood education movement. Fostering positive racial social identity, acknowledging social difference, moving on moving beyond difference as a deficit. These are all brilliant pieces. But what Dr. Sky and many others challenge us to do in the field of early childhood education and care, which I will now call ECEC from here on, is to move beyond acknowledging these various identities, but to look at how power operates. So when someone is uncomfortable sitting beside someone because of how they look or how they present, what is the bias? So you've acknowledged the bias, but what is it? Is it race? Is it class? Is it both? Is it the intersection, right? Once you acknowledge it, then we can look at the systemic piece and we can challenge the systems. So by naming it, we could say, that's anti-Black racism, or that's anti-Indigenous racism. The fact that this seat on the subway train is the last seat to be filled by a Black man presenting person, that's anti-Black racism. It's not simply bias, right? So it is, I'm not saying it's not an important aspect of our field and our work, but it's a starting point and it can't end there. So think back to 2020. Almost 3-4 weeks out from the killing and murder of Mr. George Floyd, as his family would like us to refer to him. Where were you? What were your commitments? There was a global uprising, a racial awakening, and there was a pushback against the terminology and the word woke, which basically means to be awake, to have aliveness, to have consciousness about the world around you. So I know where I was. I was in lockdown, I was at home. I was doing an online panel as the news was coming in. And I know that I was exhausted. And so were so many other Black colleagues and friends and community members who were taking on and shouldering the labor to say, this is our moment to make change. The world is finally listening to what our elders and our ancestors have been saying for years and years and years. But flashing forward to 2026, where are we in the field of early childhood education and care? Where are we? What were the commitments? What were the statements? What were the platitudes? Have things shifted? Have we eradicated anti-Black racism in the field? Not quite. So the work is not new, but it did get kicked into full gear and high gear after 2020. So it didn't just start at 2020, but there was a larger global awareness to anti-Black racism. So in challenging anti-Black racism in ECEC, many scholars have said that anti-Black racism is not simply a US problem, it's alive and well right here in Canada. And colleagues and leaders in the field, such as Natalie Royer, also penned letters to all of us to take in what that work looks like and what commitment truly means in ECEC. Anti-Black racism in early childhood education and care looks like Black children not being reflected by those who are caring and educating them, Black families not being fully integrated into the programming, Black curriculum being silent, so race silence, which some scholars speak about. It also looks like the policing of Black bodies, and not just young Black boys, there's policing of young Black girls. There was a huge report that came out of the United States over 10 years ago. And there are a lot of similarities here. There's also scholarship on this right here in Canada too, which sometimes the hyper-focus on Black boys, which I think is important, takes away from Black girlhood. And Black girls are expected, my students tell me this in class, my fourth year students, they'll say, Black girls are expected to show up and be more mature than they are in childcare settings and not have the same supports that are afforded to all students because of that intersection. Or they're seen as giving attitude or being rude when sometimes where there's a intersection of disability and race and Blackness, you'll find that some Black girls are experiencing chronic pain, but not receiving adequate supports, just as other children would. And then they're being deemed as troublemakers or attitudey children. So some of the barriers to social justice is that there are many roadblocks. So for those of you who are already doing this work, you know that it's exhausting, it's never done, and every time you feel like you get a win, there's a roadblock, right? But then there's also waves. So things come in and go like a fleeting moment. So Mr. George Floyd came in, and a lot of folks in the field are quite upset because they feel like it was just a passing moment. People put black squares on social media, and then the conversation is shut down. So how can we continue and sustain this conversation? Because the liberation of Black children leads to the liberation of everyone, right? It's about the type of world we want to create. Some of the barriers to social justice in our field, early childhood education and care. I'm going to say some quotes, and some of them might be familiar to each of you. So one is, but they're too young. And we just can't get to these topics. They're too little. I'm working with toddlers here. What are you talking about? That's leading to childhood innocence, which I'll speak to a little bit more, or coming from childhood innocence. Or African-American children, but da-da-da-da. We're in Canada. What are we saying, African-American children? Just say Black. Like, just say it for what it is, being explicit through our language, our terminology, and our work. The other is, but I don't see color. We're all the same. That's seen as a color-blind approach, or some scholars would call it a color-evasive approach. And finally, well, we cover that in Black History Month. We leave it over there. Or we put up the posters in February. And okay, it's March 1st, so we take them down, and we're going to put up the St. Patty's Day now. We're moving on. I kid you not. This is coming up in the study. It's happening. So that's tokenism. So barriers to social justice in early childhood education and care. Again, childhood innocence is the assumption that children are too young to engage in the worlds that they're very much a part of. The other piece is a lack of explicit naming, so not being comfortable to call things for what they are. Colorblind approaches, assumptions that avoiding race is a polite thing to do. So striving for a world where we're all equal, which is fair. People are coming from a good place with that. But then removing and negating the identities of the lives of the children that we're working with, that's just another form of harm. And tokenism is pretty clear. It's just the surface level celebrations and not looking at the historical pieces for why are we where we are today? How did this come to be? And how is it being maintained and reproduced? The backdrop of all of this is the state of the field of early childhood education and care. We have a field where it's predominantly women and gender diverse folks on the front lines, predominantly Black, Indigenous, and racialized folks, low paid, low wage work as well, which there have been many gains. So we need to think about this backdrop of the work that we're doing as well. So going beyond inclusion and diversity, what scholars have called for and community is an anti-racism approach. So anti-racism allows for us to examine and explore how power plays out within our systems and structures. And there are different ways of doing this, but intersectionality is key. It needs to include trans, queer, disabled, poor, people living with precarious migration status, which is less than full immigration status, as well as all systemically oppressed people. It's ongoing work and it's deep work, to what Shelley had pointed out earlier today on panel 2. It's not something where I went to the workshop or I did the terminal degree in this, so therefore I'm the expert. I am not. It's ongoing learning, it's ongoing reflection and unlearning as well. So in honoring Black mothers, I'd like for us to take some time to read the words of some of the mothers in the study that a research team I led and I did, called the Forgotten Voices Project. So this is a participant, Muna, and what's at work here is pro-Black approaches. So many Black critical scholars in early childhood education and care such as the prolific Gloria Boutte, speak about pro-Black approaches, moving away from anti-Black to pro-Blackness, which is celebratory, looking at joy. It's, yes, acknowledging the harms, but also looking at the joyful pieces as well. So if someone would like, it would be wonderful to have one of you read the participants' quote, which is on screen. I have it written here as well with my handwriting. But if someone would like, you could read Muna's quote. Any takers? Okay, up there, and then you'll read the second one if that's okay. Thank you so much.
Centering Black Mothers Knowledge Base, Pro-Black Approach, Boot and Compton Lilly 2022, honoring the brilliance of Blackness through liberatory approaches. I try to bring them out to events most of the time. They, her children, go to Wild Water Kingdom or like typical things that you do in Toronto, but I try to also bring them into cultural stuff too, so that they know who they are, because I know there's not a lot of like representation about being Black or even me like wearing a headscarf. So I tried to let them know, even though we're running around doing what everyone else is doing, we still have to like know where we're from. Forgotten Voices Project, study participant, Muma.
Thank you so much. You don't mind sharing your name? Maureen? Okay, thank you so much, Maureen. I really appreciate you stepping up to share and read the words of this Black mother in the project. So based on what Maureen read, you could see that Muna is contesting a system, trying to ensure that her child is doing the quote unquote typical things, right? We can unpack that at another time, but also trying to make sure that their racial identity, their cultural, as she frames it, identity is being centered too. So it's additional labor and burden and work, quite frankly, that Muna is taking on. So these are anonymized names. Because she's having to augment for a system that's not already doing this, right, through the practice. So that's the additional work. Thank you so much again. So the next participant is coming from the Honoring Black Refusals Project. So this is a Black RECE who said, put my name there, don't anonymize me. So this is in Jarveen's voice, live and direct. RECE of over 20 years, who brings a wealth of experience. And on this piece, I'd like us to do a couple of things. One is for us to, us, as in those in the field, because it's good to clarify the we, in early ECEC, is to stop saying ECEs need to build an inclusive practice. So that's the fluff that Shelley was talking about, if I'm on the right drift. Which ECEs? Who are we talking about? Because the literature and the studies are showing that Black RECEs are already doing this work, largely. And for those who are not, often they're making a conscious decision to withdraw from that additional labor because they're exhausted. We're exhausted, right? So Black educators are already doing this. So we need to stop blanketing all educators in the same way and acknowledge the labor that's already taking place and going into these systems. So it starts with the self. So Shelley did a great job of explaining that, so I won't pick up on that too much earlier today. And it's not a one size fits all. Not all ECEs bring the same experience. Not all of you had the same responses to the exploration activity this morning. Some people had many boxes. Some might have had none. Some might have one or two. Some linked to race, gender, some linked to both, class. Like, we are all quite different, and that's what makes us beautiful and special. So I'm going to turn to our friend to read the second quote, if you mind. Yeah, thank you so much. Okay. And your name?
Jerry.
Jerry, you had a great question earlier. Thank you, Jerry. So it's just from where the quote starts. I just always, is that okay, or do you want the?
That's fine.
Thank you.
I just always looked after the Black kids because, like, I look out for all kids, but I realized that there was so much racism that I just felt like it was my responsibility to show all the kids that we all belong. But I felt like over the 20 years, like I'm the only one doing this and not the staff. So I just felt, okay, then I'll just do it. I couldn't wait on anyone to do it. So I just did it.
Thank you so much, Gail.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you offering your energy to do that, to read the quote. I should be specific about what you did, and bringing Jarveen's voice to life. So not an anonymous name, someone who said, put my name out there, get this as far and wide. I want it out to all the childcare centers. I want it out to every level of government. And to what Amanda said earlier, also Indigenous governments too, right? That's something that I'm thinking about as a unlearning piece for my work. So really what's happening here through Jarveen's story of over 20 years of experience is she just shouldered that labor. She just did the work. She just responded to racism that she observed and she did something about it. But it's exhausting and it came with consequences as well. It comes with consequences if the work isn't shared by everyone, right? If it's just falling on a few. So it's not just mothers or RECEs that are doing this work. It's also children, right, who are engaged in this deep work. So I say that to say that this is what children are already experiencing, such as anti-Black racism in ECEC. So they're already experiencing it, they're living it. So it's good to have caring adults discuss these systemic pieces in a way that engages them with where they're at and what they want to ask about. So what I noticed from the RECEs that I interviewed in the study I'm leading, they would answer the curious questions. Why are you that skin color? Well, let's have a conversation about that. Let's read a book. Why is your hair like that? It's not, oh no, we don't talk about that. Let's go to the block station instead. Let's dig a little deeper. And I had the privilege of doing a project with Dr. Shawnee Hardware a few years back with CBC Kids, where we were brought in as academic experts, that word, to talk about learning about anti-racism with children. And the children, for those of you who haven't seen the special, it's still live and active. You could check it out on CBC Kids. But the children are bringing really nuanced discussions to anti-racism, equity versus equality versus fairness, Blackness, indigeneity, gender. Like they were bringing all of these pieces to the fore. And these were very young children as well. So if they can do it, I'm inspired and I'm encouraged to know that I can as well. And the pre-service early childhood educators who I have the privilege of teaching, they're also showing up, right? Some of them are here today, but they're also showing up. They're also doing this work and they're actually challenging me to push a little further. So I launched a course that I co-created, Black Childhoods in Canada. The good news is it's one of the first of its kind in Canada. The bad news is it's one of the first of its kind in Canada. Hello, it was launched in 2024. Okay, so this course is an elective course offered to fourth-year students in early childhood studies. And a challenge that I got from one of my students, a white student who I teach, who I've taught since second years, this should be mandatory. We shouldn't be learning this in the fourth year. I want all of my peers to know this information, such valuable information. And I don't want to go into a field where people aren't well-versed in some of just the baseline that we're doing in just, those 12 weeks, right? So that was a challenge for me because I had mixed thoughts about that, which I won't go into now. But all to say, it has been done, it can be done, it will be done. And I'm doing an archival research study right now with Black elders, and we're looking back at all the anti-racism work that Black elders did right here in Toronto in the 80s and the 90s. That's just the time period we're looking at, but the work spans even before that. And I'm telling you, my meetings with elders is 4 hours on average, each meeting. I'm getting boxes of minutes and records from community organizations such as the Congress of Black Women of Canada. There were reports. There were anti-racism policies brought in at the municipal level and different levels of government based on that community activism and work. So it didn't start in 2020, but there was an uptick, right? And it's not to say the blueprint isn't already there. The work's always been done and it will continue, but it just requires more of us asking those questions and also answering the questions that children are asking us. So the takeaways are that we all live unique lives and entry points. Social justice is ongoing work. It takes humility, to what Shelley had pinpointed and all the brilliant things that you brought to this earlier session today. And it's important to amplify Black voices in our programming, policies, and practices. Just an example from outside of early childhood education and care. Let's even zoom out. A lot of the policies, Dr. Harder and I spoke about this quite a bit in our work a couple of years ago. A lot of the immigration policies that came about in Canada came from Black activists who were fighting to challenge a racist, whites-only Canadian immigration policy. They delegated, they led, they protested, they went to Ottawa, folks like Donald Moore and many others. And that's what brought in the not so perfect, but the point system that's supposed to be based on merit. It was Black activists who were fighting for that, not just for Black community, but for everyone. So it's just one of the, there are so many examples, our anti-discrimination laws. There are so many examples that when Black community members show up to fight anti-Black racism, the benefits and the ripple effect is huge. Their names might be forgotten, but we remember. Those of us who know, we remember. And the legacies are legacies that everyone benefits from, because it wasn't only Black folks who started to come into Canada after the changes to the immigration policy. It benefited many non-Black racialized community members as well. So keep amplifying those voices. And I don't know if we have time for questions, but I'd like to acknowledge the Empowerment Circle for taking a mock presentation of mine. This is what the study, the REB, the ethics for the study, and special thanks to the participants for their wisdom, guidance, and knowledge. If you'd like to stay in touch, there's my website and my contact information. You could feel free to keep in touch, or I'll stick around for a couple of minutes after. And there are some resources, and the slide will be shared afterwards with the resources and references. Asante Sana.